Welcome, everybody. My name is Chef Emily. I am coming to you from the teaching kitchen here at NewYork-Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital. And I'm so pleased that you're joining me for this early morning class. I know we do a lot of afternoon classes. So if you're used to the afternoon time slot and you're joining us this morning, welcome. And for those of you joining us for the first time, very nice to meet you and have you here at our teaching kitchen. So we are going to be talking about nutrient density today. This is a topic that brings up a lot of questions. So I really encourage you to ask them, put them into the chat box. I know it's already been started. I put welcome, so you can all insert your questions into that chat box, and then Alita will read them to us as they come in. So with that, we're going to, if you notice in this packet, I only have one recipe today. It's kind of a three-part recipe because it has salmon, which we're going to be cooking, the rice, which we already cooked, but I'll tell you how, a dressing and a salad, and it's all kind of put together into one superfood supper. I called it superfood supper just because I like alliteration, but you could have this for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or any time of day that you like. So I like to try to kind of pack things into one big bowl. And that way I know that at least one of my meals of the day is going to be very complete, highlighting a lot of nutrient dense foods. So let's talk about the term nutrient dense first, because that is a little bit unclear for some folks. It identifies high performance foods. So basically in every bite, you're going to get more of the health promoting vitamins and minerals and proteins and complex carbohydrates instead of the simple carbohydrates. You're going to be getting more antioxidants, some healthy oils, and fewer of the nutrients that are linked to chronic diseases. So for example, some grocery stores actually use a nutrient scoring system. It's one of them is called NuVal, and that's NuVal. And that really helps shoppers pick out the most nutrient dense foods. So for example, I think fresh, have this in the packet, fresh peaches score about 100, but peaches in a light syrup score at 37. So the idea with nutrient density is that as nature produces it, there's no single food that lacks nutritional value as nature produces it, but some do have more of the good stuff that keeps us feeling energized. And vegetables and fruits, for example, we know are really high in vitamins and minerals, and they're low calorie. They're low calorie carb sources that facilitate protein transfer. So for example, bite for bite, berries, right? We hear berries are really good for us. Well, why is that? They're among one of the most nutritious fruits available. And that's because they're extremely nutrient dense. So per square inch of that food, there's more net nutrition. I hope that explanation made sense to everybody. What else did I want to mention about this? Oh, well, leafy greens, we're going to be using a lot. You can see there's a lot of green up here, a lot of greens and herbs. Those help to minimize your disease risks. Avocados, for example, provide richness and satiety of fats, and they don't really count much against the saturated fat, so they're good for that. Your omega-3 fatty acids found in salmon and walnuts and places like that strengthen the cell membranes and control blood clotting. So that's sort of the idea with nutrient density, is that you're getting food that bite for bite has more nutrient value in it. More like a multivitamin, right? You get like everything kind of in one bite, but it's coming from food. So you know your body can actually absorb it. So that's what nutrient density is. I'm going to walk us through. There's a lot of information in this packet. I have a little bit about getting the most from your food. So I have some information in here, as well as nutrient content that's altered during cooking and how cooking affects nutrients in foods, and some 10 favorite nutrient dense foods. So that's going to be our class today. Do we have any questions or comments before we jump in? I saw the chat box is active this morning.
Yes. Joy says that she read that chopped greens are more healthy than leafy. She wants to know if that's true.
So chopped greens?
Are they more healthier than leafy greens?
Okay, so Joy, usually when we're referring to leafy greens, this is what we're referring to, right? So any kind of leafy green is going to be your Swiss chard, your kale, your bok choy, your lettuces, right? Those are leafy greens. And when they're cut up, it does heighten the sulforaphane. I can't remember if I'm saying that correctly, but there are some nutrients that when they are cut, they're kind of activated, like garlic, for example. When you crush it, it activates the allicin, which is one of the components in the garlic that's really good for us. So there are some benefits to kind of chopping things up. It's actually really interesting. It's kind of like nature's defense mechanism. So when an animal goes over and bites a leafy green, the green will send all of its energy to kind of deter that animal, and it will actually start to taste a little bitter, which is why that bitter flavor it's higher. It might be higher in nutrients, but it deters animals and people from eating it. So there's kind of like you have to make a choice here. So that's the answer, Joy. Any other questions, Alita?
Not at this point, Chef Emily.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to jump into our cooking, and then I'm going to walk you through some of the information in this packet. So we're going to start with the Superfood Supper. And I just sent the packet out again to everybody that registered, so you should have it. I also included a bonus recipe if you're feeling brave. I do want to talk about organ meats today, specifically chicken liver. It's something that a lot of people shy away from, but it's very nutrient dense. So I wanted to include a recipe here on how to use it. Of course, it's important that you get good quality chicken livers, because livers are basically filters for the body. So we want to make sure that we have good, clean livers that we're enjoying. Okay, so with that, let's jump in. I'm started by preheating my oven to 400, and I have my salmon here that's marinating. So I made a marinade of soy sauce. I don't know if you guys can see these over here. Toasted sesame oil, if you can see, that's a nice dark color, right? That's very nutty. I have the rice vinegar that's going to add a little bit of acidity. The mirin is, maybe you're not familiar with mirin. It's a Japanese rice wine, traditional Japanese rice wine, sweetened sake. That is, again, that's going to add our sweet flavor. And then we have our soy sauce, which is salt. So we've got the nutty, the acid, the sweet, and the salt. And this is going to make our marinade. Now, if you wanted to, just buy a bottle of teriyaki or something like that, you could probably use that and make the marinade just fine. I just wanted to offer, some options for making your own homemade marinade, because then you can control the salt that's in it. Any other questions?
It says, I'm on a low salt diet. What substitutes for your recipes can be used?
Great. So I am actually using a low sodium soy sauce, but I also want to introduce you to another friend I have back here. This is called coconut aminos. And if you're low salt, coconut aminos kind of does the same job as the soy sauce, but it has even less sodium. It says here on the front, 73% less sodium than soy sauce. So that could be something you could try, and now it can be found widely available in supermarkets. Other questions?
That was it. That was from Joy.
Okay, thank you, Joy. Oh, Alita, you just cut out there a little bit. I just want to check
I'm
your
sorry.
audio. Okay, okay, that's all right.
That was the last question. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So I have my oven preheated to 400. I brought my vegetable broth to a boil, and I made the brown rice already. So if you're following along here, I'm on step, well, I'm going to do step 5 before I do step 4. So I'm going to cook the salmon, and then I'm going to cut up all the vegetables. So this is very easy. You're just going to add a little oil to the pan, place it in the hot pan, cook for about 3 minutes, and then flip it and finish it in the oven. So it's kind of a 2-step process. You could probably do this all on the stove if you wanted to. I just find that I get a nicer result when I finish it in the oven. So that's sort of my technique, but you can cook your salmon however you like to. Certainly, if you're comfortable cooking fish on the grill, or if you just want to put it in the oven and not do it on the stove, you can do that. You might not get as good of a sear, but you can certainly do that as well. Okay, so let's get this started. I think the 10 a.m. classes are a little early for me. My brain's not quite ready yet. It's like, are we cooking salmon at 10 a.m.? Yes, we are. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. So a little bit of oil here, just enough to coat the bottom. And when you're cooking with oil, you just want to make sure if you're using olive oil that you don't heat it up too high. And how do you know if you've heated it up too high? Well, if it starts to, a little plume of smoke comes up, then your oil is too hot and it has changed molecular structure. It's no longer good for you. So you want to make sure that your olive oil sort of stays within the appropriate ranges for cooking. An appropriate range for extra virgin olive oil, I think, is up to 375. And then other olive oils, like a regular olive oil that's not extra virgin and has been more refined, that can get up a little bit higher, I think, to even 425. So this is regular olive oil here. And I just want to make sure that it's going to sizzle when it hits the pan. I don't know if you guys can hear a little sizzle, right? So whenever you're cooking fish, you want to make sure your pan is really hot because otherwise it's going to stick. So you're going to want to start with a hot oiled skillet. And then when you're putting this fish into the skillet, don't plop it down, right? Because your oil is going to splatter up and then you might burn yourself. So if you notice, I actually went really low, close to the pan, and I just gently placed it to, against the hot surface. So that's just a little note on fish. I know often, we think, I just want to put it in and, not burn myself. But if you just go low and kind of slow and move it through, you're going to be fine. Questions, comments?
Yes, Chef Emily. Is coconut aminos similar to tamari?
So tamari is, okay, so soy sauce is made with usually just soy. And then tamari is actually often has wheat added to it. I think that's right. Or did I get it backwards? Yes. Because if you look at the soy sauce, there's no wheat in it. So tamari usually has wheat added to it. It's just a different way of processing this. It's a different way of processing this condiment, but it can be used the same way. Tamari is sort of equivalent to soy sauce when it comes to sodium content. The coconut aminos, first of all, they're not from soybeans. So if you look at the side here, the ingredient is soy-free alternative. And the ingredient is organic coconut tree sap and sea salt. So basically the way that this one works is it's, I think this is also a fermented product. I'm fairly certain that it is, but it's a fermented product like soy sauce. And that's what gives it that deep kind of like salty richness is the fermentation process. But it's just from coconut. There's no soy in it. So that's one of the reasons some folks might enjoy trying the coconut aminos because they don't have the soy.
Chef Emily, do these all taste different?
Slightly, yes. I would say that coconut aminos taste a little bit sweeter than soy sauce. Tamari and soy sauce are kind of the most alike in terms of taste.
That's it for now.
Okay. So we're going to cook the salmon for about 3 minutes. Then we're going to flip it. Then we're going to bake it. And salmon is extremely rich in the omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, which must be obtained from the diet. They're called essential fatty acids for a reason. They have to be essential from our food. Our bodies can't create them. They have to be obtained from the diet. Salmon, of course, is a great source of lean protein, antioxidants, potassium, selenium, as well as some B vitamins, which are really needed for energy. So all of this also helps to control inflammation. So we know that salmon is really good for us, but it can be a little bit tricky to source. More and more, we're finding that as we learn about our fish and where it comes from, it's not always coming from the best places. So how can you make sure that you're getting the best quality salmon? Well, I like to check the frozen section, and I know this might come as a shock to some of you, but you can find really good frozen wild salmon. If you're particularly mindful of our environment and you don't want to buy wild because you're worried about the overconsumption of wild seafood and the impact that has on our oceans, certainly you have options too. I think there are different I know that there are different farming practices across different places. So salmon can be cultivated in Norway, it can be cultivated in Chile, it can be cultivated almost anywhere. So a lot of places will basically get a large swimming pool, put it on land, and dump the fish in and feed it grain and soy and things that the fish aren't really supposed to eat. So that's not really the kind of salmon that we want to enjoy. That's why farmed salmon has a bad reputation. But there are some types of farmed salmon that are acceptable and still healthy. There's a practice of farming called aquaculture, and that's when you take a big net and you put it into the ocean, and then you put the fish in the net. So they're within their natural environment. So they're still getting all the plankton and all the algae and all the things that are drifting through the net, right? So they're still getting their natural diet, which is actually where all the nutrients come from. But they are, I'm just gonna flip this, but they are perfect. So nice, I'm just kind of pressing this down because I like the salmon to have a good contact with the pan. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself. So these kind of aquaculture practices are really, really good because they allow the salmon to eat what they normally eat. And let's finish this off in the oven. And they're also sustainable for the planet as well because they're not wild. Questions? I know salmon always brings up a lot of questions.
Yes, so there was the question about the farm-raised salmon, but I guess you just responded to that.
Perfect.
So Christine wants to know, could you repeat the type of farming, the name of it?
Aquaculture. Or
and then
aquaculture.
Deborah,
Yeah.
So then Deborah is commenting that she usually buys frozen wild salmon at Costco's. Do you recommend this? Is fish from Norway okay to eat?
So great questions. Frozen fish from Costco. I don't know where they're getting it from, but usually if it's wild, that's going to be a good source of fish for you. It might be a little bit intensive on the planet to be giving wild fish to everybody, but certainly it's going to be a healthy personal choice for you. And then in terms of salmon from Norway. So yes, there are some specific islands off the coast of Norway. I think it's like near the Faroe Islands, or Fareo, I think they're spelled. And around those islands, they have really good farming practices that are sustainable, that are good for the fish, good for the environment, and good for feeding the masses. So that would be an acceptable choice. There's a wonderful resource, and many of you have heard me share this resource with you before. And Alita, I will ask you to put it in the chat box. You probably already know what I'm going to say. It's seafoodwatch.org. So seafoodwatch.org will tell you sort of what's the best choice, right? Because there's like a best choice of salmon, a good choice of salmon, and a worst choice of salmon. They're all the same fish, but seafoodwatch.org will tell you which salmon is the best from an environmental standpoint. And usually if salmon is better from an environmental standpoint, it's usually better for you too, because what gives the salmon that EPA and DHA omega-3 fatty acids? It's not naturally occurring in the salmon, it's the salmon that eats algae, right? Eats seaweeds. So if the salmon's not getting its natural diet, it's not going to be as high in the omega-3 fatty acids. So it's really important for the salmon to be eating the algae, the seaweeds, and kind of natural things drifting through the nets or wherever they're being farmed in the water. That's how they get higher sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Any questions? I see a lot coming through. Hope that made sense to everyone. Salmon's very confusing. You can also enjoy this, any cold water fish is going to be high in your omega-3 fatty acids. Your mackerel, your herring, your sardines, your anchovies. What else? I know I'm missing a few in there, but the cold water fish are usually very high in the omega-3 fatty acids. So you can feel free to make that substitution if you want. And try to enjoy for American Heart Association suggests seafood 2 to 3 times a week. Alita, any questions?
Yeah, Chef Emily. So Barbara says that she saw smoke or steam from the pan.
Yeah.
So she wants to know if that's the smoke that's not good. She's concerned about the oils that
Okay.
she uses.
Yeah, so Barbara, thank you. So what I'm talking about is if you put oil in the pan and you start to see it smoke, that's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about once you have the fish in there, it's going to bring the temperature of the pan down. And until the fish gets, to a certain temperature, I'm not worried unless you're going to, unless you're going to burn your fish, but you should probably be okay because the fish is in there with the oil, right? Does that make sense? So that brings the temperature down.
Yeah. And then there's a question about, does the Norwegian salmon taste like the wild Sakai salmon? Wild caught tends to taste stronger.
Yeah, so wild caught does tend to taste stronger because it's usually higher in the omega-3 fatty acids, and those have a pretty strong taste. So, so I'm just going to check on this fish actually because it's time. So yes, the type of the way in which your fish was raised and processed, that will actually impact the taste, right? Because what is taste? Taste is an expression of nutrients. Beautiful. So I just want to show you all what this looks like. Right? It's cooked perfectly. It's seared on both sides. It's flaking apart. This is done. It's ready to go. Be mindful of carryover cooking. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if you take something out of the oven and that cast iron skillet is going to stay hot, it's going to keep cooking. So if you want it to stop cooking, you have to transfer it to a plate or something that's not hot so it doesn't keep cooking. So yeah, the type of fish and the way that it's raised can change the way that it tastes, definitely. Anything else?
A comment from Valerie. She says Faroe Island salmon tastes just like Pacific and not like wild Sakai.
Thank you, Valerie. I would not have known that, so I appreciate it.
So John states that, believe it or not, he's been purchasing frozen Faroe Island salmon from QVC and it's been delicious.
There you go. There you go. Taste is important too, right? So let's move on from the fish here, unless there's any final questions. I know there could be an entire class just on fish, and we certainly have done that in the past, but this class is not it. So we're going to move on from the fish and start making the rest of the salad here. So I have a little bit of honey, and we're going to start by making that dressing. Oh, I do have a whisk there. Good. Just want to get a little spoon. So I have some honey and some red pepper flakes, 1 to 2 tablespoons of honey. Did I say tablespoons? Just want to make sure I'm giving you the right information. Yes. So this is for a big salad. So it's larger amounts. If you're making this for a smaller group, feel free to use less. This is my fish sauce. So I'm using premium fish sauce. This is going to add some salt. Again, if you're doing low sodium, you can add less fish sauce. I'm going to add some olive oil for this dressing and some lime juice. So I have some fresh lime juice. If you wanted to also use the lime zest, feel free to get your little zester out and use as much of the lime as you'd like. If you want to it's just going to bump up flavor, right? I always suggest citrus zest because it's there's no additional cost to using it. There's more nutrients added through the skin, but you certainly don't have to if you don't want to. So we're going to add that lime juice. About 2 tablespoons on that. I love limes because I don't know, someone has to look this up for me. I don't know why limes don't have seeds, but it's just awesome because it makes it so easy to squeeze them and not worry about the seeds. So this is going to be our dressing, and then we're going to get together everything else, all the rest of our ingredients. I knew there was a reason that I only made one recipe today because I knew this was going to be a class with a lot of questions. So just whisking all that together to prepare. So I cooked the brown rice ahead of time. Like I mentioned, I used 1 cup of brown rice, and brown rice is amazing. It contains 3.5 grams of fiber for 1 cup, 5 grams of protein, and B vitamins and minerals as well. So the minerals that you can find in brown rice are things like iron and zinc and selenium and manganese. So a lot of important minerals in there. It's digested very slowly because of its high fiber content. So that'll also give you less of a spike in your blood sugar. So we have our dressing ready. Everything is all mixed well together. I'm going to add a sliced garlic clove here. Crush this up. So I'm really excited. This is our first head of garlic from the garden. I know I'm supposed to wait to let it, age and dry out, but I couldn't resist using the fresh garlic. So I'm taking off the exterior peel. And like I mentioned, if you want to crush your garlic and then chop it up, that's going to activate the allicin. Now, some people say to wait 10 minutes or so in order to make sure that the allicin is fully activated. I think it's going to take 10 minutes for me to finish the rest of the salad. So that works out perfectly for me. I'll mix it in with everything else and it'll just add, it'll just wait in the dressing and add flavor in there. Questions or comments? So far, so good. Okay.
Sorry, somehow my thing is not working that well today.
That's
so there was
okay.
a question about sauteing the fish and then putting it in the oven. I did put that on step 5. It says to cook it for 3 minutes and then put it in the oven.
Correct. That's what we did.
Yeah, and so there was a comment about whether the salmon had skin, but your recipe says 6 pieces of skinless salmon fillets.
Yes, so my piece does have skin. You can take the skin off or leave it on if you'd like. So the skin does contain some extra nutrients in it. So if you want to eat the skin, feel free. I don't mind it, so I left the skin on. I know some people don't like salmon skin, so it's up to you. Yeah.
And then Deborah has a question, interesting. It says, does brown rice have arsenic? She's been afraid to eat.
Yes, great question. Mm-hmm. Okay, so brown rice, yes, it does have this reputation for growing in waters that contain arsenic. So it does have this reputation. But I will say, I think you have to eat a lot of brown rice in order for it to be problematic for you. So I will go ahead and venture and say that there are cultures all over the world who are subsisting on rice. And I'm not seeing a lot of arsenic poisoning due to rice consumption. So, if it's the only grain that you're eating, well, maybe that's another conversation, but it's certainly something that can be enjoyed once in a while with other grains too.
That's anything else?
Okay. So we're going to chop up our leafy greens. So I've got some Swiss chard and kale, and bonus points if you can name this one. Anybody know what this is? Everyone's like, what is that? Isn't it just stunning? It's really beautiful with the purple in the back. So this is amaranth. And amaranth is a grain, but it also grows into leaves before its leaves are edible. I'm just not going to use the stems for the salad because they're too fibrous for my taste. So when you're working with your leafy greens, bunch them up and slice down. Slice across. You want to get a nice fine shred on these. So amaranth, as I was saying, is really nutritious leafy green. It's not in this recipe, but I had it in the garden, so I'm just tossing it in. This recipe calls for kale, which I also have here. So variety is so important. So I had all these 3 greens, so I'm going to add them all in. So in goes the Swiss chard. This kind of kale is known as Tuscan kale or lacinato, has these big, beautiful leaves. And to take the stems out, because the stems are tough, you want to hold it, kind of get it started at the base, and then pull. Okay, so I'll do that for the rest of these. So talking about kale for just a second here, kale has gotten so much attention. And yeah, it's a really wonderful leafy green to enjoy. It's one of the most nutrient-dense greens. This is a class on nutrient density. So I felt like I couldn't not use it. But you can get a lot of great nutrition from other leafy greens too, as I'm also demonstrating here. 1 cup of kale contains 3 grams of protein, 200% of your vitamin A, which is just insane to me, and 600% of your vitamin K. So it's a very, very nutrient dense green. It also contains some vitamin C, some minerals, calcium, copper, potassium, magnesium, and iron. But the iron that's found in leafy greens, and this is where you can get more out of your food. This kind of iron found in leafy greens is called non-heme iron. So there's 2 types of iron. One that's found in animal sources that's called heme, H-E-M-E, and then other ones that are found in plant sources like kale, non-heme. So that non-heme iron is great, but our bodies don't fully absorb it. So what you can do is you can pair it with a food that contains vitamin C. Does anyone remember what we put in the dressing that contains vitamin C? Da, 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 da. Alita, you remember.
Well, it's either honey or lime juice.
Yeah, it's lime juice. Yeah, so lime, exactly. I saw someone just put it in the chat. Lime is a great source of vitamin C. So we're pairing this, right? We're intelligently designing this salad. So we're pairing it with the lime juice so that it's going to help to unlock that, that non-heme iron. I'm going to stack up these amaranth leaves, chop them up. I just love the color of these. I couldn't resist adding them, even though I thought it was going to confuse everyone because it's not on the recipe, but they're so pretty. Look at that. Beautiful, right? All right. So we've got our greens in there. So we know how important leafy greens are for us. Try to pair them with vitamin C to optimize the nutrition there. We're going to add some carrots to this too. Now, carrots, of course, are a great source of beta-carotene. Now, you can peel your carrots or you can leave them unpeeled. Now, unpeeled with the peel on, you're going to get more nutrients, right? Because the skin has more nutrients in it. And so I guess what I mean to say is it's up to you. Some people don't like the taste of the peel because it's a little bit bitter. So if you're one of those people and you just really can't tolerate the carrot skin, that's okay. Peel your carrot and you're still going to get a lot of beta-carotene. Now, beta-carotene is orange in color. So if you see any orange or yellow foods, that's where you're going to unlock some beta-carotene, right? So you just want to, and what is beta-carotene good for? Beta-carotene is converted into vitamin A in the body, and vitamin A produces retinol, which is really good for your eyes. It's important to help us actually sense light. So that's why people say carrots are good for your eyes. All right, so we're gonna add our chopped carrots. It's gonna add some crunch. Okay, we're adding some herbs to this. So in this bowl here, I have a mix of cilantro, parsley. Let me see if I can, there's the basil. I have some mint. This one's the parsley, this one's cilantro, right? And I don't mind using stems unless they're mint stems. I find mint and basil stems are not very yummy. So I do pick the leaves off the stems. You can put the stems in some water and, you know, just let them kind of infuse your water. They do have a little bit of flavor. Just take a taste of your stem and see what you think you can use it for. So I'm going to pick these mint leaves off. This recipe, I think I wrote down mint, cilantro, and basil, but I had some parsley from the garden, so that went in there. And a brief note on cilantro. Cilantro is really, really powerful. It is has wonderful antioxidants. It is immune boosting. It's anti-inflammatory, and it has this really interesting power, like superpower. Cilantro has been shown to have mild chelating effects on the body. So what does that mean? It means that we're exposed to heavy metals. I'm just picking the basil off the stems here. We're exposed to heavy metals in our environment. It's just a side effect of modern day life. And how do we get rid of those heavy metals so that they don't get trapped in the body? Well, the body sometimes can manage it on its own, but foods like cilantro, for example, have chelating effects, which means that they help draw the heavy metals out of your body and help them find safe passage to the other side. So that is a really amazing superpower that cilantro has. So I try to use it as much as possible, you know, and some people don't like the taste of it. That's okay if you don't like cilantro. You know, there are other herbs too, and they have their own superpowers, right? So basil, for example, basil is actually in the mint family. There are many different varieties of basil. There's Italian basil, there's Greek basil, there's cinnamon basil. And basil contains vitamins A and vitamin K and vitamin C, as well as calcium and iron and manganese. So it's really also another, you know, powerful herb. These herbs are like tiny superheroes. They are just, it's amazing to add fresh herbs to your salad because not only does it increase the flavor, especially for our low salt friends out there who are, you know, looking for a little extra flavor, the fresh herbs just add so much flavor and they add so much nutritive value. They're like these little tiny packages of nutrients. So in terms of nutrient density, fresh herbs are definitely your allies. Questions or comments?
Yeah, this is a great group. They have a lot of really good questions. So Barbara wants to know, so a vinaigrette should have citrus and not vinegar for more nutrition?
So yes, you're correct. Actually, that's a good way to put it. So vinegar has its own benefits. Vinegar, especially something like apple cider vinegar, which is, you can sometimes see there's like, it's like a little murky and it has little strands of things floating around in there that everybody thinks like maybe a little gross, but actually really good for us. So vinegars are fermented products, and as a result, they have probiotic qualities. So that's really great for supporting our gut health. And we know that when our gut health is well set up, then it really influences the rest of our health as well. So I wouldn't say use lemons and limes, every time to make a dressing because it's the only thing. You can make your vinaigrette with your vinegars. Try to find ones that are, that look funky, because that's a good thing. And then if you're, but to unlock those nutrients, you could squeeze some lemon juice in your water as you're enjoying your lunch. You drink your lemon water or your lime water, or whatever, or even have an orange for dessert, or some grapefruit, or chop that up and add it to the salad. That's another way to kind of, you just kind of want to have it in the same meal. So it is paired together. All right.
There's a question here. I'm assuming it says if rice is the main grain eaten, but it doesn't say what kind of rice. Is it like having white potatoes or white pasta a lot?
Okay, great question. So there's different types of rice and there's different types of pasta and potatoes, but we won't go there yet. So the type of rice we're using today is a long grain brown rice. And what does that mean? It means that the grain it's integral, it's whole. So there hasn't been, grains are composed of 3 parts: the bran, which is outside, the endosperm, which is in the middle, and then the germ, which is at the bottom. A whole grain has all 3. Some rices are polished, and that's how you might end up with a white rice. The bran is taken off. So what does that mean? It means that they're going to cook faster, right? Because the water doesn't have to penetrate that bran and cook it. And it's going to be less nutrient dense and less valuable to you because it doesn't have the fiber that regular good old brown rice does. So nature packages these things very intelligently. We go ahead and then mess with them. But if you're eating like a whole grain brown rice, there's no harm in that. Certainly don't make it your only, grain of choice. There's so many other whole grains out there, and you can make this with any one of those whole grains. I just used brown rice today because I wanted to emphasize the difference between the brown rice and the white rice. But there are, lots of different grains you can make substitutions for in this recipe. You could use farro, you could use bulgur, you can use quinoa if you're gluten-free, you could use buckwheat, you could make this with millet. You could also use, I'm going through the whole list in my head, and then barley. I'm sure there are many others. So sometimes you'll see on whole grain, you'll see the word pearled. And if you remember, does anyone remember those rock tumblers from when you were a kid, maybe? I mean, I don't know if I was the only one that had one of those, but you could put the rocks in and then it would tumble and it would kind of polish them and it would kind of get rid of all the outside stuff. And that's sort of what happens with rice or some whole grains that say pearled. They're put into essentially a rock tumbler, and that bran is kind of falls to the wayside. Now with pearled barley, for example, it's partially, when you see the word pearled, it means it's like partially tumbled. So there's still some bran on there, but it's not completely devoid of the fiber. Any other questions?
Yes.
I'm going to chop up these snap peas.
Yeah, there are quite a few. So how much cilantro has to be eaten to get the chelating effect?
The chelating effect? That's a really good question. I don't have that answer. I'm not sure in terms of quantities. I just try to add a little bit to my dishes here and there. And, it's going to have a good effect regardless. So I'm not sure on quantity, how much you have to eat, but any amount is helpful.
All right. So do herbs provide just as many benefits fresh or raw versus when they've been cooked in the recipe?
Okay, so that's a perfect segue. We're going to talk about cooking next. I'm going to walk you through, oops, do we have time? Yes, we do. I want to walk you through in the last few minutes that we have on getting the most from your food. So I'm just going to add the cashews to this. We're going to toss this all together. This is done, and I want to walk you through the cooking and stuff because there's a lot of interesting things to discuss about in this packet. So you just want to toss your veggies. And I apologize, I think we are going to go over maybe just a few minutes today because there have been a lot of questions, and I want to make sure that I answer everybody's questions as best as I can. So this is our gorgeous, gorgeous salad. And the way that you're going to build this, you have your piece of fish, you have your cooked grain. And I like to kind of put the grain on the bottom, right? You don't need a lot. I kind of just like move it across the plate like this. And then you can add all that good nutrient dense veg on top. Okay, so this is your plate. You can see you've got all the food groups in there. And can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting a little like beep beep on my headphones. So maybe it's telling me that the battery is running low. So I'm gonna go really fast. And if you lose me, I'll put the other headphone in. So getting the most from your food. Chewing very well is important. Making sure that you chew well actually helps you absorb nutrients. So important that you chew. Do that and thoughtfully if you can. Specific vitamin allies, fat-soluble vitamins, A, E, D, and K. These contain some kind of fat. So those are very important for us. We know that the vitamin D is best paired with calcium. Those are allies together. Iron and vitamin C, those are allies together. Other factors that I wanted to mention, processed foods. And this is where things get really interesting, in my opinion. Processed foods, low in nutrients and high in sugar, can rob the body of nutrients. So not only are you putting bad food into your body, but that bad food goes in and then it starts to steal nutrients from you. So try not to eat too many foods that are heavily processed. One of the nutrients that it specifically robs is magnesium. There is a widespread magnesium deficiency, I think, in this country. So that could be one of the reasons why, is because we're not eating foods that, first of all, give us magnesium, and then some of the foods that we're eating are stealing the magnesium. Certain medications can also interfere with nutrient levels, so check with your doctor about your medications and if they're interfering with your nutrition. And here's another one that's really interesting, stress. Stress can increase our nutrient requirements, especially vitamin C, vitamin B, and magnesium. So when you're feeling stressed, you actually need to eat more nutrient-dense foods. They're going to help to support you. Alcohol may reduce our digestive enzymes. So that I found interesting as well. And then other allies to mention, whenever you're enjoying turmeric, which is a wonderful nutrient-dense food, enjoy it with black pepper. They are like hand in hand, they have to go together, and that'll help to absorb the active component in turmeric called curcumin. There are some foods called anti-nutrients, so I'm going to get to those next. But I just want to talk about how nutrient content is altered during cooking. So cooking does help to improve digestion and increases the absorption of a lot of nutrients. So I have an example here. Cooked eggs, the raw protein in cooked eggs is 180% more digestible than that of raw eggs, right? And that's just a really good example of how cooking may actually influence the nutrient content of your food. So some nutrients are reduced when cooking. So those are going to be your vitamin C. When vitamin C is exposed to heat, it's like, oh, I'm out of here, right? B vitamins, when they're exposed to heat, they tend to trickle out as well. They're better at kind of standing their ground, but when they're exposed to heat, you will see a lower level of B vitamins. It doesn't mean that there's none, it just means that there's less. And then fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, those are often reduced when cooking as well, which is why it's good to have some raw salads and some raw foods on your plate. It doesn't have to be the whole plate like we did today, but some raw elements so that those vitamins and minerals aren't completely, wiped out. And then some minerals are reduced during cooking as well: potassium, magnesium, sodium, and calcium. So I have different cooking techniques here: boiling, simmering, and poaching, grilling and broiling, microwaving, roasting and baking, sauteing and stir frying, frying and steaming. So you guys can have a look at this handout and spend some time. And if you have any questions about that, certainly feel free to email me. And then I just want to talk about this concept of anti-nutrients, because this is something that is starting to come to the surface a little bit and more folks are interested in. So tea, for example, tea and coffee can inhibit the absorption of some vitamins and minerals. So it's hopefully, if you have the opportunity to enjoy your tea or coffee outside of meal times, so you can absorb the nutrients in the food and then have the tea or coffee. Lectins, so all plants have lectins. There are higher levels of lectins in things like beans, tubers, grains, your nightshade family, and we'll talk about those in a second. And what lectins may actually be resistant to digestion, especially when eaten raw. So it's useful to cook, soak, or sprout foods that have lectins. So usually, like beans, for example, there's a reason we don't eat raw beans. First of all, they'd be really crunchy, but also they are really high in lectins. But cooking reduces that. So canned beans, fine, right? Because they're already cooked. So that's an example. Soaking things, I'll talk about that in a moment as well. I want to talk about oxalates. This is also considered an anti-nutrient. So oxalates are a protein that binds to minerals like calcium. So if you have a lot of foods that are high in oxalates, your body may not fully absorb the calcium in that food. So oxalates kind of prevent the absorption of calcium. High intake of oxalates for those who are prone to kidney stones can be problematic. So if you're prone to kidney stones, you're going to find oxalates in like spinach, for example. One of our wonderful, superfoods, oxalates are really high in spinach. They're not as high in kale. So that's one of the benefits there. And then I want to talk about phytic acid. Phytic acid is found in nuts, in beans, in seeds. And phytic acid can bind to minerals and kind of steal them from us. But you have to eat a lot of legumes and beans and nuts and seeds in order for that to really happen. And the good news is that soaking, sprouting, and fermenting and cooking decreases phytic acid a lot. So you could, if you wanted to, for example, with your rice, you could soak it first for 45 minutes and then you could cook it. That would even disinhibit the phytic acid even more than just cooking it. So there's options there. And then I want to talk about gluten too, because some folks, are curious about that. So gluten is the protein that's found in wheat, barley, and rye. And for some people, it can contribute to inflammation, but not for everyone. So if you don't have a gluten sensitivity or a gluten intolerance, it's probably fine for you to enjoy it. But for those of you that do, you probably know that you do because it's not comfortable. All right, and I put a list here of our 10 favorite nutrient-dense foods. I put salmon, kale, seaweed, garlic, liver. Liver is really, really high in B vitamins, especially B12. It's high in niacin and folate. It's one of the highest sources found in food. It contains a lot of copper, iron, zinc, and selenium. So liver is definitely a superfood, but nobody likes it because it's an organ meat and poor little liver gets left out. But it's really yummy. So if you know how to cook it correctly. So I did include my favorite chicken liver pate recipe, which maybe we'll have to make sometime together. But I just wanted you guys to have something so you know what to do with liver. It has a very distinct kind of irony taste to it. It kind of hits you at the bridge of your nose. So it's a particular taste, but it's like a multivitamin. So it's really great food to enjoy. Okay, I also have here shellfish, sardines, blueberries, egg yolks, and dark chocolate. I'm going to end on that because dark chocolate is one of my favorite nutrient-dense foods. So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you staying a little bit longer, and I appreciate your time and all of your questions. Any final notes, comments, anything?
So there are a lot of wonderful comments for you, but 3 questions that are there. One is portion size. Okay. It says 4 6-ounce pieces of skinless salmon fillet, and yes, people were thinking that this looks like a large portion of fish.
Yes. So I would say that this is 2 portions. I just didn't cut them in half. I didn't cut them in 2.
All right.
Yeah. But I wasn't going to make all 4 because then
You'd have to eat them all.
Yeah, but I'd have to eat a lot of
There was a question about basmati rice. Is that a healthy rice, a grain?
Okay, so basmati rice is really interesting because I don't think that it's a polished grain. And if you put basmati rice under a microscope, so a lot of rice that you put under a microscope is kind of one long piece. But basmati rice is like, if you were to imagine like a roll of quarters, that's kind of basmati rice under the microscope. It has like all these little pieces to it. So basmati rice, I would say on occasion, yes, if you can find a brown basmati rice, that's even better. I know that there is brown basmati rice. So that's as much as I know about that.
And then the last one is the value of dried herbs.
Okay, so dried herbs do have some nutrient content. It's not all gone, but certainly the fresher herbs are more nutrient dense than dried herbs. And you want to add your fresh herbs just at the end of cooking so that the vitamin A, vitamin C, all of those heat sensitive vitamins aren't destroyed by the cooking process. So if you're using fresh herbs, you put them in at the end, unless you're using like thyme, rosemary, and oregano, which if you put those at the end, it's just going to impact the flavor of your dish too strongly. So those are what I call the woodier herbs. They're like on a little piece of wood, and those can be put at the start of cooking.
That's it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions, your participations. Thank you, Alita. You did a wonderful job moderating, and I really hope you'll join us all again next week. We've got some more classes coming up. Gosh, if I can even remember what they are, but I'm sure they're going to be great. So come on back. And thank you for your attention today. Bye, everyone.